say thank you for joining us. Today we have the second edition of the Innovation Café online, and we're here with our speaker Jessica Smarsch, as well as Mayra from Art and Tech Society. Just a little bit about the Innovation Café for the people who haven't been here. Normally we are a networking event, also with a substantive note in the form of talks or presentations. But because of the whole situation, we decided to go online. So we are very happy to have a little Q&A session after our presentation now. Mayra, you can tell us a little bit about Art and Tech Society?
Yes, thank you very much, Jessica, for the presentation. It was very good. Thank you very much. Art and Tech Society every month cover a different topic. So in this case, it's wearable terminology. Last week, we have Marina Tuters giving a presentation about fashion in relationship with wearable technologies. And next week, we will have Svetlana Mironsika giving a presentation in relationship to ethical aspects and a little bit more the trends. So it's going to be very interesting. So please join us next week. A little bit about Art and Tech Society. It's a new foundation in the city in Eindhoven, and we use art and technology as enablers of social innovation. So, and this is the intentions to be very critical about the technology we're using and try to do it, to give a good purpose for the technology we are creating. So yes, and the words are for you, Jessica. I think we will start with questions and answers, Margot, right?
Yes, exactly. For the people at home, just put your questions in the chat and we will get to them. First, I want to give the word to Mayra for the first question.
Yes, I have. I have two questions, but I will go for the first one. During your presentation and also the experience that you have been had in the last years, you work with many disciplines. You work with scientific people, you work designers, healthcare specialists, and even other technical aspects. How do you see what difficulties do you encounter and how you face that problems? Because at the end you have amazing projects. So it must be a combination of all of them. Can you tell us a little bit more about this experience?
So working with scientists and technologists, you mean in different fields, what that is like for a designer. Personally, I really enjoy it. I kind of come from I see myself as creative and visual, but I also have another side that's very organized and likes logic. So maybe not all designers are like that, but I actually really enjoy having the input from more, let's say, like left-brained thinkers. But also it's really necessary. So I think more and more we need to accept that technology is present in our lives, and as designers, it's hard to ignore it, and that means that you need to collaborate with technology experts and with scientists, or in my case, working now in the medical field, also with therapists or doctors, and actually they add so much to not only the project but to my experience. And of course, on one hand, it's important to find specific people that you can connect with, who understand what you're trying to do and who want to help you build that together. So that's first of all really important. And once you find collaborators that you can connect with, I think the most important thing you have to do is be open and listen to the expertise that they have to offer. And hopefully, if you've found the right partner, they also want to listen to your perspective as well. And those are the best relationships when developing work. And I've personally really enjoyed the collaborations that I've had, because I see through the work we make what kind of progress we can make when we both listen to each other and we're working towards a similar goal.
Thank you. Only one question more,
Yeah,
Margaret. Yes, about prevention. You mentioned that your projects are being used to help people to recover from a problem. Is also the trend is wearable technologies also in the way to use as a preventive mode, for instance, for stroke or for depression or yeah, loneliness or mental health. It's yeah, is that what we see in the future now?
Well, I mean, I think if you think about, for example, how do you prevent a stroke? Well, the best way is to be in good health. So, I mean, if you don't want to have a stroke, you should, watch your weight. Don't smoke, don't drink, exercise. And actually, um, there's already, for example, a lot of health trackers that are out on the market. So those can be seen as, preventative wearable technologies. And I know, like, from speaking with someone who's coming from like an insurance perspective, preventative care is also really interesting for them as well. So, I mean, prevention is a great area to be working in when it comes to health and well-being. And yeah, there are some. I don't have a complete inventory of all wearable technology initiatives that are happening right now, but I do know, at least in my my network, for example, Danielle Roberts is someone who's worked with meditation, and she developed a wearable that looked like a kind of the monks wear, a kind of outfit of monks wear, and inside has like 9 different sensors, and it is able to sort of gauge how the body reacts to different environmental factors and what kind of an impact that has on the meditation experience. But certainly, I think it will be a growing area in general, wearable technology and how it affects our lifestyles, our health, for definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Do
Thank
you,
you. Well, I will be in the back. So
okay, thank you for your questions.
anything you need me, I will be there. Okay.
Just because you're saying there's a difference between obviously what you're doing, like wearable technology, and the technology that's, for example, in like watches. Do you see like there's a possibility for collaborations there as well? Or you not really?
Between specifically what I'm doing, um, well, I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure exactly what that collaboration would be off the top of my head.
No, of course.
But yeah, I mean, there's always possibilities to think new ideas.
Yeah, maybe I should formulate differently. Would you like to see something like that happen, or is it more like you would prefer to stay within the wearables that you're creating yourself, like because they're
For
very
my
different things.
specific application, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, I guess the thing is, there's a lot of ways you can address, any problem. So even, for example, in my presentation, I show that Neo Effect glove.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's a good product, and I'm not criticizing that as a design, even because, the way that's used is it goes on, someone does their exercises and they take it off, and if that is helping the patient, I think that's a good product. The reason I'm working with textiles is I have my own reasons for that. I'm collecting different information. I also, the idea is that they can wear it throughout the day potentially. So you want something that's more comfortable. But I could see, I mean, there could be other ways of tracking that might end up being more useful, and maybe it is a strap-on sensor on different parts of the body. So I really think it depends on like what issue you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
When you think about what kind of technology you want to develop.
Yeah. Okay. Would you, because I mean, specifically looking at the Connect Style project, do you see that, because now it's very specifically for stroke patients or recoverers, do you see that also like maybe applicable to other things? Or is it really like, I mean, obviously it's very directly designed for stroke patients, but maybe, do you see like possibilities for other applications in that way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially now, the direction that we're going, what I show in the end, we're trying to minimize this design to being a sleeve design and integrating the sensors in a very seamless way. Um, Actually, the references that we're looking at now, when we're looking at the fashion design, we're looking at the kind of designs that are trending in like leisure wear. And not because we're trying to be on trend necessarily, but it's interesting that what is trending in this sort of sport fashion is really applicable to what we're trying to do, because we're talking about the body. So I could definitely see like these new transitions that we are doing with this, stroke specific project, being able to very easily flow into applications like, athletic performance measurements, for example.
Yeah, fair enough.
Or other rehabilitation.
I find it interesting that you're saying like we're following the trend, because I mean, this is also like, I guess, a thing that you're struggling with, like in aesthetics ways, like how versatile is the actual design of this project? Because I mean, everyone has a different idea of what is aesthetically pleasing. How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, well, that's true. And, I'd say like when you see the video, there's a very specific design there. And I think like, that was an interesting iteration. It very well communicates this concept that, I wanted to show about this process. But now what's really nice, I mean, I have a textile background, but not necessarily like a fashion or apparel background. So I'm now working with a real fashion designer. And also working with, I mentioned the Knitwear Lab, which is here in the Netherlands. And that actually opens up the possibilities for me to really develop something from scratch. And so together, we're developing from the yarn, we're developing the material, and from the material, we're developing the design of the garment. And some of the discussions I've been having amongst the different designers is how do we design it to function but also be beautiful, and what does that mean? And speaking, just if you want to take it really basic, for example, like a man and a woman, do they have different aesthetic interests? Well, not to be totally black and white, but in general, you might be able to say, yeah, there's going to be different looks you want to. So we're already kind of thinking about like how to make at least two different pieces that are going to sort of work together but have different aesthetics. And yeah, I think of course it's always difficult to make one design that everyone will find aesthetically pleasing, and in the end someone might say, no, just give me that glove, actually. That's what I find most interesting.
And I can also imagine that the design that you're making is not specifically like super easy to change every time. So like you have to make it a bit more long lasting and not so much on trends, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, like we're trying to we're looking at functionality. I mean, that's of course important for the design. And then after that is when we're looking at the different material possibilities. And for example, I show in the presentation right now, we made these examples where you have a very sheer look, but we're also trying some other ways to get lightweight materials. For example, if you think about like what we see in sportswear right now, like in athletic wear, you see these kind of like open knit structures. That we can replace a sheer area with that type of structure and give it a totally different feel. And those are kind of like easy changes that give a totally different identity to the design. So I think that's really interesting to explore, so that you can offer different options for a range of people who want different looks.
Yeah, exactly. We have some questions from our audience. Svetlana asks, it is very interesting to hear more about the experience of the wearers. What do they tell you?
Yeah, well, it's hard to be honest, it's hard to get a lot of feedback right now so far with actual stroke patients. Um, right now, I'm in a program called I2 Court, which is helping to bring medical technologies to the market. And so right now I'm working with them to try to get to a product where we can really test with patients. So that's something that I also sort of struggle with, trying to get feedback from real patients. But there's been a few patients that I've been able to sit with and have them like give feedback on more on like the look of it. And I would say there's kind of like a mixed review. Some people say they do want something really simple, like the new design that we're working towards, which is much simpler. And I've had other say that they like it, they would wear it. So yeah, but the bottom line is user input is really important, and looking to collect more of that.
Okay. We have a very long question, so I'm just going to read it out loud, just so everyone will understand it. I'm sorry if I mispronounce this. Chail is talking about his startup Anivab, which means translation in Hindi combines traditional craft as a medium to create well-integrated aesthetic e-textile products with integrated heating and lighting starters. It's a way to create a win-win situation to help involve traditional crafts as well as have flexible production competencies for e-textile technology. One of the biggest issues I have found is the assimilation of new technology in conventional textile production processes. What do you have to say about this? Do you think it's true and we need to think of alternative production possibilities, or have the companies already started to evolve to adapt to new textile and electronic technology?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that is the difficult part about wearable technologies and e-textiles. So I mean, the textile and fashion industry it's like a whole chain of players that are in place in specific ways, and they work specific ways, and infiltrating those processes is challenging. So I mean, I think the question is like, do you want to change the system, or do we need to rethink how the system works? So how you make textiles, how you make fashion. um, Personally, I think might be better to think about ways to change systems and create new processes rather than trying to adapt some of the existing processes. But not just because it's difficult, but also because there's new technologies that we have been seeing, that we're developing. Just for example, people using laser cutting to create pattern designs. That's a new fashion technology, like new in terms of the technology of making clothes. Or so I think that it's easy. I think it's a challenging question. I understand where he's coming from. But I also think that there are some examples of where we're starting to see new developments happening in production possibilities.
I guess it's also not really like something that just changes, that's just able to change overnight. It's like quite a long process to integrate these.
Yeah, well, also, I mean, for example, with like what I'm doing with Fraunhofer, I mean, this is a process that they've developed, but it's still like in the lab at Fraunhofer. So, I mean, in the end, it's a lamination process, but typically there isn't necessarily like one manufacturer that I could that I know I could call up tomorrow and say, okay, I have this piece that I need to assemble specific. Laminating on textile exists, but maybe there's not exactly this connection for laminating electronic text PCBs, so there's some steps that need to be sort of filled in there still.
I have a question from Mauricio. He's asking, what are the biggest challenges you're facing right now? Are they technological or user acceptance, scalability?
Well, so I mean, I'm definitely still in a product development phase, but at the same time, I have taken steps towards making it a real product, and that includes the business development side of it. And so, I mean, there's always challenges everywhere. There are, of course, challenges in the production or the product development stages that I'm going through right now. Just because I work with several different partners, so you have to coordinate different things coming together. And then, there's also coordination with clinics and therapists and what they want to see in the product. And then trying to, test that, get validation with patients. And then the business side of it, of course, comes with its own list of, responsibilities. So I mean, because I'm most heavily right now in the product development phase, I mean, that's probably where I could pinpoint most of I think he used the words challenges. Yeah. But challenges are everywhere when it comes to developing a new product, especially in medical.
Yeah, I can totally imagine as well, like there's different things involved than when you're just designing as a designer while you're working, for example, in a medical field that has lots of regulations that come with the things that you need to
Yeah, it certainly complicates it. I mean, fortunately, this specific product is, in terms of levels of like invasiveness, it's like the first level. So that makes it easier when you talk about developing a medical product. But there's still a list of requirements you have to be checking.
Yeah, exactly. I have a question from Prem, and I'm hoping that I'm interpreting this right, but he kind of wants to know a little bit more about the sensors and the technical aspect of the project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's like two parts. Basically, there's the text PCBs that I show in the presentation. That's about collecting muscle energy. So, and that's basically using silver textile to pick up microvolts from the muscle and send it to a processing module. So that's one aspect of the sensors is about muscle use, and the other is about movement. And so, as I mentioned, the sending microvolts to a processing module. In the processing module is also an IMU. So the IMU is it's collecting information about movement, so acceleration, and there's a gyroscope in the IMU. So so it's a combination of movement and muscle activity that's being collected, and that is translated to the app through this module from I2M.
Prem, I hope that answers your question. Then, because I mean, you were saying this project is still in development. Do you see this actually being able to be produced on a larger scale for stroke patients, or do you think it's going to stay more local or smaller?
Well, I mean, the intention is to try to make it a viable product. So, I mean, the first step, and that's what's nice about this program that I'm in, this I2 Court program, it gets me access to clinics, therapy patients. And that's really important if you want to have a medical product. It's really important that you have, let's say, buy-in from the therapists, from clinics. Those are people that are going to get your product to the patients. So, now very nice that I can work with the Adelante Rehabilitation Center in Hoensbroek in the Netherlands. I think they're a partner to hopefully start off something, and then you hope that it grows from there.
Yeah, because are you also, do you have funding? And because I mean you work, I guess, also with the partners, I guess that also influences the way, like, how far you can develop these things.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I've been really fortunate. So I think so far I've had 4 different grants to develop the project, and each grant has a different angle. So some of them, for example, are more focused on the wearable. Other, like the first grant was called Wear Sustain, and that was an EU Horizon 2020 grant, which also the reframe grant that I mentioned is also a Horizon 2020 starts EU. So there's these levels. So that was also focused on wearable, but also about data privacy. I also had a grant from the Dutch government that was a feasibility study. It was more business focused. So I mean, actually, one of my friends calls me the grant hunter, but I mean, that's kind of what you have to be at this stage of development. Always looking for ways to get funding that are specific to areas that you need to develop.
And that's a whole completely different like field almost, right? Like to find all of
Yeah, well, I've gotten very good at learning how to write grants. But I mean, what's also nice about the grants is that it's connected me with a lot of really important partners. On one hand, it gives you money to pay for work you need to get done. But also, like for example, with Reframe, I mean, that's enabled me to work with Fraunhofer, which is a huge research organization. And Stratasys, another like really big company. And through this grant, I'm able to develop work with them. So these have been really good opportunities for me to move the project further.
We're running out of time, guys, so I'm just gonna try to get to all of your questions. Let me just double check. Mauricio asked another question. If you have some information on where you could find more information about your research on 3D printed geometry on textiles.
Actually, I don't have any printed or like any information on that specifically. In fact, that's something that it's been a new exploration for me as well. And that's simply that, I had this idea to do something with this compression idea. Actually, and the idea to do it in 3D printing came from my partner, Christian Dills at Fraunhofer. He said, "Oh, we could do that. Maybe a medical connection would be good." And then we remembered, well, we have Stratasys we could talk to. So to be honest, it's something that it's been a new exploration for me as well.
Ernst is asking, did you ever consider to use your product or technology as computer input interface in general, as opposed to using it for stroke therapy only?
Yeah, well, I think that kind of I'd say that goes back to what we were talking about before about maybe being able to use it for other applications, like for athletes, other ways of tracking the body, tracking movement. I mean, I would even say it could be a little easier, to go in that direction, and if you want to go for commercialization, because there's less requirements than in a medical application.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is going to be the last question from Svetlana. What is your feeling for this kind of project that you are developing? Is it easier to develop in Europe or in the US in terms of brands, contacts, or business angels?
Well, I worked 10 years of my life in the US, and then I came to Europe actually to do the master's at Design Academy. And that's when I started taking more of an entrepreneurial route. So it's hard for me to speak about what the experience is like to develop in the US because I haven't personally tried it there. But I can say, I mean, my experience in Europe has been very positive. I mean, I don't know if it's just luck, but being able to, like I said, get 4 grants to develop this project The European Union has specific interests right now in wearable technologies, and there's specific money that is for designers that want to work with science and technology. So, I mean, I think I've also benefited from this specific interest that the EU has had in funding this. So my experience has been good here. It's hard for me to talk about and compare it to the US. I'd be curious as well, actually.
Might be interesting to discuss a bit further. I think because we're running out of time, and I just wanted to have some closing notifications. First, I want to thank you for answering all the questions and the great presentation. Like Myra said, next week we have another talk, and we hope that Jessica, maybe you will be able to join as well to give your perspective on the next viewpoint. For the people online, I want to say thank you for joining. If you want to rejoin in a second to talk a bit more, you're very welcome to. And otherwise, we hope to see you next week.